Chronic pain is one of the most difficult challenges I've had to deal with in the last years. But it's also been one of the most interesting and fascinating journeys to figure out the cause and the solution to my chronic pain, but especially also to learn a lot about how to navigate an issue like this, especially within the holistic landscape. And that's what this podcast is about. Now, my name is Kasper. This podcast is Walking Our Path. I am out walking in nature right now, and I would love to invite you to join me. That's the idea of this podcast. I go out on a walk in nature, and I share my best insights and stories and lessons, and I invite you to do the same, to go out into nature, have a walk, do something that's good for your body, instead of scrolling on your phone or whatever it is that you usually do to consume content, scrolling, reading, looking at a screen. So, why don't you get up and go for a walk? Or maybe fold your laundry, do something else useful. Anyway, in this podcast, I would love to share with you a bit of a journey that I briefly mentioned in one of my previous episodes around chronic back pain, and actually also around chronic sleep deprivation, because that's kind of what I shared a few episodes ago, that I had 2 years of some pretty intense challenges relating to my energy, to my body, and so the short of it is that, let me introduce it like this, actually, because it's not necessarily relevant for me to tell you all about my chronic pain personally, I believe. But I do think that I have some principles that I learned from this whole journey of dealing with the chronic pain that could be of value, especially since I know how many people are kind of floating around the scene of holistic healing and different modalities. And in this whole story, I learned a lot about navigating this and about how to take certain advice and why sometimes we are put on a path that we think might solve it all, and we get hope, and then it doesn't work and we get disappointed. So there's actually quite a few unexpected things here and a lot of big things that I learned about myself. And since I shared about having this chronic sleep deprivation and chronic pain, some people have been asking me like, hey, could you share your lessons about this? So just to be clear, this is just my experience. I'm not a doctor. My chronic pain doesn't necessarily relate to your chronic pain. And even if you don't have chronic pain, I think there might be some really valuable insights in this particular episode around navigating our body, the relationship that we have with our health, with our well-being. All right, so I'll go back 2.5 years ago. Atlas was born, our incredible little guy, and he didn't really sleep well. For about a year, I was up between 6 to 12 times per night, and it was really, wreaking havoc on my health. And if you want me to do an episode about navigating chronic sleep deprivation in relation to having little kids, I'll happily do so. But this one is about the pain part. And really fascinatingly, the whole time I was like, man, at some point, he's going to sleep better, and then I'm going to feel better. I'm going to have energy. And in this year of sleep deprivation, I also actually had the biggest year of business growth in that same year. So it was sleepless nights, a lot of work, and I could really notice in my body that I was building up, like a debt of exhaustion. I could see in pictures of myself that my body was changing. I was developing a dad bod, so to say, but I could really see that was like a hormonal shift, that my hormonal balance was off due to having dysregulated like cortisol and insulin levels throughout the night. So then about a year later, we finally started working with a new kind of sleep coaching method in a way. And after a week or two, he started sleeping through the night, and I was like, man, good times are ahead. And then fascinatingly, in that same week, I pulled something in my back. I basically woke up with it, right? I woke up, I got up to sit up in the same way that I always do, and my lower back completely gave out. And I could barely move, couldn't bend over. I had a lot of pain and very, very limited range of motion, very limited movement. And I was like, man, what is this? And then throughout the course of the day, it slowly dissipated. And I was like, man, I'm lucky that didn't stay. Because, to be honest, when I was in my early 20s, as some of you know, I was quite overweight. I was about 35 kilos heavier than I am now. I smoked a lot, I drank, I ate unhealthily, I sat on the couch playing video games all this time. And then I also had chronic pain issues. So I would wake up and my neck would pull and I wouldn't be able to turn my head for a week, or I would have, sometimes I'd have 3 debilitating migraines per week, or I'd have lower back pain for like a few weeks and it would slowly go away. But that was all part of my larger, say, palette buffet of poor lifestyle choices, which all relatively effortlessly went away when I really started committing to my health and my movement and my nutrition. So this time I was like, man, I've been, I was going to the gym, I was training, I felt like I was taking good care of my body. I still had the sleep deprivation and I was carrying a few extra kilos due to all of that, and I wasn't able to really work out as much as I wanted to because I was just low on energy all this time. But then as soon as I started sleeping better, this happened. So that was already a big mystery to me. And the thing is also that it wasn't chronic in the sense that it just stayed. I woke up with it. After a few hours, it would dissipate. And I was like I said, I thought, oh, wow, this is now over. And then the next day I would wake up and it was the exact same thing. And the next day, again. And some days it would stay until the end of the day. And some days it would dissipate within an hour or two. But every single morning I would wake up and my back would be in excruciating pain. I could barely get up. I would have to kind of crawl out of bed, get myself upright. And I had this whole phase where I could barely pick Atlas up out of his bed. So I would wake up and then he would wake up, and then it was like, okay, how am I going to do this? This is going to be a whole workout and a whole lot of pain before I have him out of his bed. And I managed. I dealt with it. So it's really interesting. One of the first things that somebody said when I shared about this chronic pain was more of a kind of a spiritual person. And they said like, well, lower back pain or back pain in general has to do with carrying too much responsibility. And I was like, okay, I can see how that plays a role. I wasn't necessarily super skeptical. But there's an issue with spiritual people who have a map in their mind of how things work. And then when you share your experience, they immediately go, oh, that means this. Oh, you had that experience? That means this on a spiritual level, or that means that, And I think that this is a bit of an unfair way to negate somebody's in the moment experience. And also if somebody shares about, for example, pain, because chronic pain can be very complex in many ways. And it's also just a very kind of mentally disturbing experience. It's just, I don't believe it is in high integrity to paste your view of life on top of that. But like, oh, that means that. Just like how I heard someone who had a miscarriage and they shared it with a spiritual coach. And then they were like, oh, that means that the baby decided, the soul decided that they didn't want to live in this life and ended the pregnancy. And I was like, whoa, that escalated quickly, right? I mean, it's not that I'm not open to the thought necessarily, but it's somebody has a strong life experience and you immediately put on this really kind of frame of like, that's what that means. Reminds me of a story of my mom who worked in a hospital, and there was a child of about 6 years old, and she was very sick, deathly ill of probably some kind of cancer. And then the pastor of the church came by and he was like, all right, why don't you start confessing what kind of horrible things that you've done for the Lord to punish you in this way? I mean, right? So this guy, my mom practically kicked him out of the hospital, literally. So yeah, there's this way of like giving meaning to somebody else's experience. And I experienced that quite a lot, because what I found is that it was almost like every time I would mention, or somebody would just notice my pain, right? I would get up and I would be like really crooked and I would like embrace and huff and puff, just to do something basic as getting up from a chair or from the ground, because I often sit on the ground while I'm teaching. And then people go like, oh, he has pain. That is a missing puzzle piece. And I have the missing puzzle piece, right? So there's one puzzle piece and I have the missing one. Here's mine. So I went through about 8 or 9 months of a process of trying to find different solutions. And I'm very blessed because I'm surrounded by many practitioners of many different schools of physical and all kinds of therapy. So I saw 4 different physiotherapists who, I'm lucky they show up at my courses a lot, because a lot of kind of medic and paramedically trained people come to my breathwork certifications. So I could get access to some awesome perspectives and people. And I decided to just be open to anything that anybody had to offer, but not take on a frame like that. So somebody goes, oh, it's because you're carrying a responsibility. Back pain is about carrying. Okay. Somebody goes, oh, it's because of this. And I go, all right, let's see, let's try. So and the funny thing is that everything helped, right? So I had, everything helped a little bit. So I had different types of physiotherapy. In the end, I had, for example, dry needling, which made me feel about 80% better right away for a few weeks, and then it slowly slipped back again. I got this protocol with these specific core stability exercises for lower back pain. I did those, they really helped. So I did those in the morning, and then it would get about 50% better. And on some days it wouldn't help at all, right? So it's kind of like one step forward, one step back the whole time. And this is what a lot of people who deal with chronic pain also have to deal with, just to keep trying. And a lot of people give up at some point. I did 3 different kinds of chiropractic, or I saw 3 different chiropractors who all practice different styles. One is more energetic. One was a functional neurological chiropractic that basically focuses on rewiring the way that the brain directs muscles. And if there's an imbalance in the body, the idea is to correct those through, for example, eye movements and complex movement exercises so that the body balances out. Of course, I took it from a breathwork perspective a lot, because very often pain in the back and in the shoulders is a response to a suboptimal breathing pattern. And in a way, even though I've been practicing breathwork for 10 years, in this year of sleep deprivation, for example, I started snoring more and more, right? Because if you sleep in a poor state, it's much more difficult for your body to maintain proper breathing mechanics. So I was snoring more. So I was like, yeah, maybe Mr. Breathing guy that I am should fix his breathing and work on his breath. So did a lot of that, a lot of breathing, trying to calm my nervous system, trying to bring myself out of a stress state. I was like, maybe it's just chronic stress from poor sleeping and a lot of business growth that was causing it. And yeah, I just kept trying and trying all these different things. So physiotherapists, chiropractors, some other types of body work. And the funny thing is that in a way everything helped. I even had some energetic healings. Somebody gave me an energetic healing at a distance. Somebody gave me an energetic healing like with hands. And I'm just like, I'm open to anything, like whatever, And the cool thing is that through this, I learned everybody's different perspectives. And all of them had something to share about how the body works that I learned about. So what I started to do is I started to relate to this chronic back pain as a teacher instead of as a problem that I needed to solve. And even this can sound like a spiritual bypass. It can sound like, oh, but chronic pain is, you should just like see it as a teacher and be grateful for it. And this is one of those perspectives where you cannot skip ahead to. You cannot be like, somebody hurts themselves really badly, you go like, oh, wow, looks like you have a new teacher, And this is a spiritual bypass, or again, filling it in for somebody what it means or what they should do about it very quickly. But that perspective is valuable if you reach it in a very natural and organic way. So at some point I was like, okay, I can decide to wake up and go like, oh, another shit day because of my pain. Or I can decide to wake up and say, okay, so this very loud signal of pain is still being sent in my body. There's probably a reason that I do not understand yet. And there's probably something that I get to learn in order to resolve this issue. And I think that this is one of the most important mindsets that we can take when we're dealing with any kind of a chronic issue. I had the same thing when I was dealing with my anxiety, with my depression. Like I said, I've had a lot of issues that were chronic in my life. At some point, we have to realize that we are not necessarily the victim of our stupid body being somehow broken, and that we need to fix it, right? Because the body will, and this is an incredible quote that I kind of synthesized from different quotes that I've heard, but it's basically, the body whispers before it screams. And if you can listen to the whispers, you can save yourself a lot of screams. Oh man, this is so cool. Okay, check this out. For those who are watching the video, I'm passing by a really cool little lobster-like being. Let's see if I can get him in frame. Hey, little lobster guy. Hey, what up, dude? Look, and if you see the video, he's like putting out his claws. He's trying to be all impressive. And yeah, I don't know if you can see him on the video, but whenever I catch some kind of wildlife out of my walks, I have to show people. And I shouldn't be too excited seeing this little guy. Actually, I should catch him and eat him because this is a Japanese lobster that is an invasive exotic species that is messing up our biotope here. Anyway, I'm going to leave this guy alone. I'm not going to do a live lobster slaughtering on a podcast here. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to get distracted, but I just love little critters when I'm walking around. So the body whispers before it screams. And if you can listen to the whisper, you can save yourself a lot of screams. Now, chronic pain or chronic anxiety or depression, which I've dealt with, or any of these things are like the body screaming at you. It's like, hey, pay attention, listen up. There's something here to learn, something to change, something at some level that you're not aware of is not aligned. And this is why here is pain, or here is depression, or here is anxiety. Now, it can, of course, be both an internal circumstance or an external circumstance. I'm not saying it's all between your ears, but pain or things like anxiety or, one sec, I'm walking by a freshly cut lawn here. Wow, such distractions. Lobster attacks, pollen attacks, but I'll make it through. So there's a signal, right? That's saying, hey, there's something that is not fully aligned. There's something that requires attention. And this could be an external factor, an environmental factor, social, but it could be emotional, it could be spiritual, it could be physical. And that's the interesting thing that I've learned about my body is that the pain, for example, physical pain or lack of range of motion or the inability to feel certain parts of your body, in essence, aren't that different from things like anxiety or depression or emotional issues. And this is just something that I personally have experience in having both pretty intense mental distress and pretty intense physical distress and emotional and all these things throughout my life. If I say it like this, it sounds like I'm such a mess, but hey, we're all beautiful messes. And yeah, what I find is that in dealing with these issues, there's not necessarily such a big difference between these different aspects. Now, of course, in some cases there is, like I was once kicked by a horse when I was out walking in the forest, broke my arm. I made a whole episode about this, episode 2 of the podcast. And now it was pretty clear that there was an external factor that was causing me to have a lot of pain. And luckily, it was also very clear how that could be resolved and fixed, right? Through surgery. And then, of course, through my own breathing practice, and this is what the whole episode is about. Episode 2 doesn't really matter. Right, so in that sense, it's very clear. But with chronic issues, if you try all of these things that all these experts tell you to do, because I was just following the opinions of experts, and still it doesn't work, then it means that there's more to learn. So this is a very important mindset shift that I had once again, just going, okay, I'm done being sad about this pain. I'm done feeling like, oh, I'm a victim, I can't move, I can't take care of myself, I can't go to the gym because everything hurts so much and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to see this as an opportunity to learn about my body, and I'm going to make it more meaningful by seeing it as an opportunity to learn something that I can spread with my audience and to learn something that allows me to relate more deeply with the people that I see in my work who have pain issues. And that suddenly made it very different for me because I've been, of course, in my work, I don't treat anybody, I don't tell anybody I can heal anything. But I do meet a lot of people who are dealing with chronic issues and who are finding breath work as a helpful tool. So I know by now hundreds of stories of people with chronic issues that were navigating this same thing, right? Who were just navigating, trying to find a way to live a little bit better despite all the advice not helping, medical advice not helping, holistic advice not helping, and just staying on the search for more lessons, more insights to resolve their issue. And the funny thing is that through all of these stories that I've heard, which are literally hundreds, there's one common thread in these people that keep going and that keep a good perspective on life. And that it's that they've chosen to see this challenge, this issue, as a gift that keeps on giving in terms of lessons and insights and personal growth. Right? So to me, that was a big shift that I made once again. And this is the funny thing also. I've heard all of these stories. I've had chronic pain and resolved it before. And still, I wasn't at that perspective right away. So this is another thing that I think we should realize is that sometimes we go through a phase, something difficult, and then we kind of like conquer it, we resolve it, and then we feel like, oh, that's done, I can do that now. And then we have another issue, like a stressor in life, mental distress, a pain, like a challenge, and then we go like, oh, how unfair, I thought I was done with resolving challenges because I did that last time, right? And I should be the kind of person who can fix this. But to be fair, life is always changing and we are always changing. And of course, the things that you've learned and that you've healed in yourself and that you've let go of, you can probably keep those, right? But then life will always bring new challenges. And I think that's also the point. Life will always bring a new challenge no matter how much personal growth you do. Right? I see so many people in the personal development scene who just kind of want to be done, you know? They want to be like, okay, what's the one method, the one thing? When can I be done? Well, you could be done right now just by accepting that you're fine the way you are. And if you can't accept that, you got to change it. Accept what you can change and change what you can't accept. I'm pretty sure Buddha said that. And he said some good things. So, funnily enough, it was only after a lot of different types of treatment and different types of, let's say, approaches and practices from a more holistic perspective that I was open to the medical perspective. Because in my experience with these kinds of issues, I kind of already know, it's not that the doctor's opinion is not valuable, but I kind of already know what they're going to say because I've been through this. So after a few months of trying these different things, and like I said, everything was helping a little, I decided, I'm just going to go see my GP and just ask. And I was right. I said, they basically said all the things that I was expecting. They asked me all the basic questions about movement and about lifestyle and all this stuff. And they were like, yeah, also don't know. And then I decided to get an MRI. And this is actually somewhat unrelated because I was just so, I've always wanted to do like a full body scan. I've always wanted to be able to see my whole body in like these 1 millimeter slices. I always thought like that's one of the coolest things, to be able to see my whole inner world, all of my organs. And I've been kind of saving up as a gift for myself to get an MRI. I know it sounds weird, but that's the kind of person that I am. As a biologist, as a self-optimization nerd, I was like, man, I've always wanted to be able to see the inside world. And because I thought this was a purely muscular issue with the lower back or a nervous system issue, I thought like that's, this MRI, I saw it as somewhat unrelated to this thing, to the pain. And then I did the MRI, and it turns out that I had a bulging disc. And then the guy who was discussing all the MRI results with me, or all the test results, because I also did like a cardiovascular thing, and I did like a genetic test, and like basically every test you can get. Super fascinating. To be honest, not fully worth the money, but it was super, super cool, super fascinating. And the guy who was showing me the results was like, oh, hey, you have a slipped disc, bulging disc. Do you happen to have any back pain? And I was like, yeah, actually, I have a lot of back pain. And he was like, oh, okay, so that probably explains it. And I was like, okay. I've been trying to do all this lifestyle stuff and change all these things, and I just had a slipped disc. So that put me on a track of researching, bulging disc, researching how a bulging disc works and how this can be recovered, and how, all of these exercises. And I was doing all of these different core stability training and different techniques and balancing things. And I was seeing different practitioners and professionals for bulging disc. So I went all the way down that rabbit hole until I found 2 or 3 professionals who said like, yeah, probably this chronic pain probably has nothing to do with the bulging disc. And I was like, what does that mean? And they're like, well, it just seems like it just doesn't correlate, that this type of pain doesn't link to the disc bulge. I see them all the time, and that's not it. And I was like, well, interesting. And I found a study that actually showed that they did MRIs on just a whole bunch of people. And a whole bunch is not a scientific measure, I know, but a lot of people. And they saw that the vast majority of people in the modern world have bulging discs. They have just like a not fully perfect spine because of seated behavior, or maybe that's just what happens as you age. And it also said that by far most of these people, I think it's like 90%, but I might be slaughtering the statistic, but by far most of the people have bulging disc, and by far most of those do not have any complaints, any pain or anything. So I was like, that's probably also not it. Anyway, so you see, I kept like finding a track, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is the thing, this might solve it. And I follow it, I learn a lot, learn about my body, learn about health in general, learn about all these things. And then it turned out to not be it. And this can be very disheartening for people who are dealing with these chronic issues. But again, if you just see it as a continuous invitation to learn new things, then everything stays fascinating. And of course, it was frustrating as hell. But then also, I had to deal with frustration in my body and also acknowledge how the last few years I've been super fit, I've been super strong, I've been super healthy, and I almost had forgotten what it was like to not feel in that great shape anymore. But from that great shape, I was telling people and teaching people how to feel better. So I'd lost connection with the perspective that a lot of these people have of not being in great energy, not sleeping well, not having an easy time getting their body into the shape they want, you know. So now I was also in connecting to something bigger than myself, not just my own pain or my own path or my own learning. I was able to connect it again to something larger than this. And I was like, wow, how amazing that I get to feel what it's like to not be in great shape so that I can be of better service to people who are struggling with these issues. And one of the things is finding a track, getting hope, following the track, and then realizing it's a dead end, losing hope, and having to pick back up again. Now, like I said, there was lots of frustration. I had many moments where I was like, man, I cannot live life the way I want, but there has to be something else to learn. And then two very interesting things happened. One of them was that, and I don't know how this happened, but something must have culminated somehow, maybe a wrong movement or whatever, but suddenly, after a while of it getting slowly a little bit better incrementally, suddenly it was just the worst ever. So the whole time, basically, it was just my lower back, and if I would lay down, I would feel okay. So I'd have to lay down a lot, and as I would lay down during the night, I would wake up with less pain, and then, I would overnight basically have no pain, and then as soon as I would get up, it would start again. So that's how it went. And this time, for about 3 days, it was so bad that I couldn't even lay down without excruciating pain. And there's no movement, no position that made it any better. And it was just 24 hours of the loudest scream in my body the whole time. And then, hilariously, this is also like, I have to question myself why this is. But like I said, going to a doctor is just not the first thing I do, because I've done that a lot. I've had a lot of issues, and it was just never really the first thing that gave me all the perspectives, right? I'm not against it, actually. Like I said, and I hope that you get this, is that I'm trying to get advice from all different directions. And a lot of my friends are doctors, so before I go to, my formal doctor, I ask my friends, so I've been getting advice from the medical kind of like area. But the last thing that I thought about was pain killing. I'm the kind of person who's like, yeah, but why would I shut off the signal if there's something to learn from the signal? So in this like 9 months of chronic pain every day, I did not take any pain medication. And now it was so bad that I was like, oh, clearly I'm going to take pain medication. And just to get me through the night. So I took paracetamol, and it helped a little bit. And then I remembered a herbal painkiller that I hadn't taken in a very long time, which is called kratom. Now, this is a very long story. Kratom, but I'll keep it very short. Kratom is basically an opiate analog. It is a plant from Thailand, and it has an analgesic effect, which means it's a painkiller, and it works on the opiate receptors without being an opioid. And it has a lot of kind of the benefits of opioids without the big downsides, in the sense that it's far less addictive. Now, to be very clear, to some people it is highly addictive. So it's kind of like, yeah, you're not entirely sure what you're going to get from it. But for me, it's always worked really well as kind of like a mood booster, a painkiller, a nootropic. And I'd had a phase of experimenting with it, and I still had some. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm just going to take that, and maybe that'll get me through the day. So for 3 days, I just took as much kratom as would allow me to not have pain. And fascinatingly, 90% of the pain, not just the acute, very intense pain that I had for the 3 days, but 90% of the pain I've been having for such a long time had suddenly gone. And I realized, like, oh yeah, me just taking the pain and only like going into it and trying to resolve it and working with it might have been an extra stressor on my system. And it was when I took the painkillers, I was finally just out of this constant contraction around the pain for just a little bit, just a few days, for my nervous system to relax and actually make a big leap forward. And this to me was totally out of the blue. Like I've done every single possible lifestyle thing that people do to get off painkillers for months. And a painkiller was a portal into a completely new perspective. And I was like, wow, that was fascinating, right? I was so happy to be wrong about painkillers. And again, like I said, it's a great perspective shift. So I took these for 3 days pretty strongly, and then for 2 more days. And then I stopped taking them, and actually my pain had gone down a lot. And now I had a new perspective. Now it's like, okay, you know what? I need to open myself to all kinds of other ways of doing. And funnily enough, I had a family constellation session already planned for quite a while. And I saw this as somewhat unrelated to my chronic pain issue, in a sense, because I was just like, oh, I'm just always doing different types of therapy and different types of modalities for self-exploration. And I really felt called to do a family constellation, systemic therapy session. And then I had I don't have time to go into the entire story. And it's also, it's a long personal story that might not be of any interest to you. But in that week, basically, I had another session, a physio session for my back. I actually saw a coach of mine who's talking about general life stuff a coach that I like to see around some things I was dealing with on an emotional level. And as kind of homework to prepare for this family constellation session, I got this questionnaire that I had to fill in about my family. And there were a lot of questions about my family that I'd never asked. And I started to ask all of these questions about my family to my mom and to my dad. And I started to learn so much about my family. Like all these things I'd never really known because I just didn't think to ask about my grandparents, about my great-grandparents, about, people that had been lost to the family due to death or miscarriages. And like I was getting so much information about these things that happened in my family. And I was like, wow, it's kind of mind-blowing. And it was really changing my perspective on life so much. And I noticed the pain dissipate a little bit more. It's like, fascinating. And then, like I said, this was one of those weeks where everything came together, because another thing I had scheduled was a therapeutic, psychedelic therapy session. Oh, I said therapy twice, but yeah, a psychedelic session. So after a week of asking questions about my family and sitting with my own coach, and then also being in ceremony, basically in a session with psychedelic medicine, and I started getting all of these insights around my family, around my relationship with my work, around how I carry myself. And then 3 days later, I had the family constellation, and I was sitting in this family constellation, and I realized that the big theme in my life was carrying responsibility and carrying way too much on my shoulders and carrying things for others that don't belong to me. And in that session, I was able to resolve a lot of that and let a lot of that go in this kind of field that constellation work works in. And after that session and that whole week of things, so in the course of that week, so it was like months and months of all kinds of things, and then it was painkillers, which relaxed me enough to do deep inner work. Then I had my preparation around my family, psychedelic ceremony, family constellation, and after that week, the pain has never been back. It's completely like, I don't like, and this is a weird thing about having chronic pain. At some point, if you have a chronic pain or chronic anxiety or a chronic issue, you can't remember what it feels like to feel good anymore. If you've ever had one of these issues, it's a really kind of sad, unpleasant feeling that you just can't remember what it's like to feel vitality and to feel like strength course through your body and things like this. And ever since I've kind of like lost this pain, or I've resolved this pain in my system, I now can't even really bring the sense into my body of what it felt like to have all this pain and to be so exhausted. And I mean, now still I have a baby again, so I'm not having great nights, but just by comparison, if I look at my energy levels, the way I feel, my mood, I can barely get back to the person that I was when I had the chronic pain, because that took so much of my bandwidth, so much of my emotional bandwidth and processing capacity away from me. Right? But after that week, it was gone. So hilariously, one of the first things that people told me, hey, lower back pain is about carrying too much. It was absolutely correct. It was absolutely correct. Um, and it's really interesting how these patterns, these emotional and behavioral patterns that we experience as emotional or mental, how they also manifest in the body. And this is something that I see in my work all the time, that there's so often when there's chronic tensions in the body or chronic pains in the body, that, you know, we do an intense breathing session, or there's, you know, some body work, and people can approach the emotional layers of that and release the tension from the nervous system around the emotion and the ways they stand in life. And then sometimes, yeah, they see pain resolve. But that's the thing about this path of holistic thinking, is that it's not linear, right? So somebody telling me way at the beginning of this whole thing, going like, oh, that has to do with chronic pain. Oh, sorry, chronic pain, this chronic back pain has to do with carrying too much. Well, sure, that sounds great, but this is not a linear path. It can't be like, oh, now you told me that, so now I'm going to stop carrying responsibility and disregard medical advice on all of this stuff and just do that, because it doesn't work that way usually. You have to arrive at the insight in your own way by yourself. Otherwise, it's not going to work, right? Think about the cliches of like, oh, but all you need is love, you know, or just love yourself. Well, okay, sure, it sounds great, but how? How am I going to get there? What am I going to do? And for that, we need to walk our own path. Right? We need to walk the own path of life, ask our own questions, go through our own learnings, and then we can get the profound insight. So it's not that this person was wrong in the terms of the content of saying, hey, this means you're carrying too much responsibility, or you're carrying things that are not yours, and that's reflecting as lower back pain. And I was also, it's not that I wasn't open to it, but it's like, yeah, cool, okay, I can see how that would be, but I'm not there yet. I have not arrived at that insight. And of course, it was a valuable thing that has kept me also on a course. I was open to it, but it took a very long time for me to come to a point where that specific theme was actually resolvable. And I think that is one of the big issues that I see in my own journeys that I've had around chronic pain and around lifestyle-related issues, and, you know, the migraines and the depression and the anxiety, is that the linear thinking often doesn't help. And this is also what I tell lifestyle coaches that I train, is that very often people who have these issues, these chronic symptoms, they keep going to find another person that resolves it for them. Hey, I have a problem. Can you fix it for me? And then they hope that the whatever doctor or somebody professional goes like, oh, you have a problem. Let me take that problem and fix it. And then you're fixed. And sometimes this works, and that's great, of course. I mean, it would be awesome if we could all find the most direct route out of our issues. But in order to figure out whether it's physical, whether it's a bulging disc, whether it's emotional, mental, or spiritual, whether it's linked to old trauma, whether it's linked to your sitting behaviors, to your lifestyle choices, to your sleep pattern, to your breathing pattern, it could be any of those, right? And in order to get there, we have to stop thinking linearly. And that's often the difficulty with holistic thinking, is that holistic thinking is thinking in terms of a web, and acknowledging that if you would have a web of things, or if you imagine like a whole ball, like if you have a thread, you know, and you have this giant ball of a wool thread, and if you try to untangle the wool by pulling a thread all the way on the right side, every part of that thread, you know, this giant knot and this giant web of things will move. So if on one side of this giant ball of thread something arises that you don't like, for example, chronic pain or some other issue, and you try to resolve that by pulling on that, you will start to see that that is connected to the entire web and to all of the things. So that you cannot think in this linear way, let me just cut that out, or let me just fix that in this one way. And this is also another thing that in linear thinking, you basically say, I have a problem, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me. And then you go to a doctor or a therapist and you go, can you fix me? And again, I have nothing against doctors and therapists. I've seen many of them my whole life. And I have a lot of friends who work in that field. And the point is more that the way of thinking, the frame is, you have a problem, let me find a solution. And especially with chronic issues, one of the chronic issues with chronic issues is you keep believing that you are more and more that you are a problem. Right? You go like, man, I have this problem, I am this problem, I need to resolve this, I'm not okay until I resolve this. And if you keep seeing it as a problem, it's very difficult to see it as an opportunity for learning and to see it as an invitation for learning. Now, both of those perspectives are fine. You're welcome to see it as a problem, and you're welcome to see it as an invitation for learning or as an exciting challenge, because that is just a perspective shift. One is not more true than the other one. The question is which one is more useful to you in your life, right? So I'm never the person to tell anybody what they should believe, but every now and then it's my role to remind people that what you believe is not necessarily true, and that there's always different perspectives. And if there's one thing or many things that this chronic pain issue has given me is many, many different perspectives. Anyway, that was a 40-minute rant, I believe, so I'm going to end it here. Thank you so much for walking with me. I hope this was somehow insightful to you. If you have any questions, anything you would like me to speak to, always feel free to email me at hello@breathworkmasterclass.com. Breathworkmasterclass.com is also where you find my training programs, my courses, all the cool stuff. And if you're out on a walk, please make a little story, post it to your Instagram, tag me at Kasper's Focus so I can see where you're walking and share it with the rest of the people that are walking with me. And for now, wish you a wonderful day, and until soon, peace out.